Hello, Bryn.
Hi there, how are you?
I am good. Thank you for jumping on and teaching me how to Wrexham.
You're very welcome.
So today we have Bryn Law, who you guys might know from the documentary series. You might know as a Leeds United fan. You might know as a Wrexham fan. There's You might know him from a lecture that he sat in earlier today at what is it, Leeds University or
Leeds Becky University is my current place on that one. Yeah.
all right. Well, today we are looking at Swindon Town FC. First and foremost, who is Swindon Town FC?
Well, Swindon are one of those teams who, a little bit like Wrexham in some ways, can claim that at various moments in their past, and they tend to be moments, they've had sort of really good things happen to them. But generally, the tale is one of being in the lower reaches of the football pyramid. When I say the lower reach of the football pyramid, not as low as Wrexham have been, by the way. They've never been to that non-league level, Swindon. So they've always operated in the top four divisions, but they have operated in the top division just about in living memory. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. They've been a Premier League team. So they have been right up there. They've come all the way back down. Gives you a sense, I guess, again, of that whole concept of being able to move up and down the league structure in football, as it's set up not just in England but basically in Europe as well. So you can make that journey. You can climb to the top of the mountain, and then you can just as quickly slide all the way down the other side of it as well. And Swindon, to an extent, have done that. I mean, it's not been a rapid descent for them, but it's been a descent nevertheless. They also, I think, they got the League Cup. They once won the League Cup final away back at Wembley, which was unusual because they were a lower division side at the time. So that was one of their sort of great days in their history. And so when they were in the very top division, they had some notable players. A manager who was Glenn Hoddle, who was sort of very famous ex-England international, great player with Tottenham Hotspur and others. So they've been there, and then they've had hard times as well recently. Again, the theme is there that we could compare with Wrexham, where they've had kind of ownership issues around the club. There've been major financial problems that they've suffered as well. So they've probably been through all the tests that most of the teams in the English setup have been through at the lower level. Everybody's got similar tales to tell, to be honest with you. Wrexham's are a bit more dramatic in many senses than some, but everybody's got that, they've got that bit in their history where it's gone really well, and then they've got that other bit in their history where it's gone really, really badly. So I guess Swindon kind of fit the bracket on that one.
And you said they were in the Premier League. Was this a regular level for them to perform at?
No, it was an unusual climb and ascent for them to get to that height. And I mean, it didn't last an awful long time. You do get, fairly regularly in the way the game's set up in this country, you do get clubs who make that climb. We've seen now Luton Town, who previously operated at top tier level, but it wasn't the Premier League, I don't think, in those days. But so they've gone down. They've been at the level Wrexham were at last season, that fifth tier level, and then they've made the climb all the way back up through the divisions. One of their players appeared in a Premier League game, who also played in the non-league. So I think he's the first player to make the journey from the fifth tier level all the way up to the very top level. So these things do happen from time to time. You get teams that will make occasional appearances at that very top level, who then drop down to the level at which they're much more used to operating. Wrexham's, by comparison to that, is not obviously to ever get to the Premier League level yet, but they did get to the level below, Championship as it's called these days, League Two as it was called in those days. So that was a relatively brief spell that Wrexham had at their highest level ever. It only happened once, and it only happened for, I think it was 4 seasons. So Wrexham got that far up the ladder and then slid back down to something, an area, an environment in which they felt a little more comfortable, because that's where they'd been ever since joining the Football League. Until, of course, they then departed the Football League for the wilderness that we've been in for the last 15 years. So, so Swindon's is not quite the dramatic fall of Wrexham on that basis, but they have had good and bad moments in recent history for sure.
When you say more comfortable, at a level. Is that a business operating level because of the size of the town, or
Yeah,
what
yeah,
factors are?
yeah. In many senses, that would be it. It's where can you actually genuinely operate? What is the level at which you can actually genuinely operate here? Realistically, how long? Because the higher you are and the longer you're at that level, the greater the long-term investment required to sustain that position. And that often becomes a great challenge for those who climb the ladder and get to the top rungs. To then stay in that position becomes increasing. Although there is more income derived from it, it gets harder and harder to compete at that higher level because you've got to constantly keep reinvigorating as numbers go up for the types of players that you're signing, the amount of money that you're paying them. If the crowd base doesn't go with that, or there's a limit on the type of the size of the crowd that you can attract, or the commercial deals that you can attract, at some point the likelihood is that the two things will collide, and you'll then find that you're coming back down again. And life maybe gets, financially it can be tricky on the way down until you until you find a level at which you can work again sort of a bit more comfortably. So generally, yeah, you've got the top 6 plus who are clubs who are now so big that they will almost certainly always be at that level unless something incredibly dramatic happens. But for most of the rest, it's a constant effort involved in either getting there and staying there, or just staying there for some of the top flight teams. So Wrexham, through most of Wrexham's history, have been a team that came into the Football League when it had a slightly different divisional structure. When Wrexham came in, there was Division 1, Division 2, and then the third division was split into 2 leagues. It was a North region and a South region, so geographically split. And Wrexham came into the Football League for the very first time, having operated previously outside of the Football League. They're invited to join at the Division 3 North level. So that then, they changed that. They brought the 2 divisions together from the regional perspective. Everything became national. And then they made it Division 3 and 4 instead. So they split, instead of having 2 third-tier levels, they had a third-tier level and then a fourth-tier level as well. And Wrexham have always been had until 15 years ago, and basically almost always operated between those 2, 4 and 3, 4 and 3, 4 and 3. Briefly, 2, and then back to 3, immediately back to 4, 4 and 3, 4 and 3, 4 and 3, and then 5. And stayed in 5 for 15 years.
And speaking of the regional areas, for anybody that hasn't looked it up yet, where is Swindon Town in the UK?
It's in Wiltshire, which is kind of to the west of London. So if you were driving out past Heathrow from London, at some point on the M4 motorway, you would pass signs for Swindon. So it's between. It doesn't help if you don't know where Cardiff is, but basically it's somewhere in between London and Cardiff, the 2 capitals, the capital of England and the capital of Wales. And Swindon's on a straight line. There's a relatively straight line runs between the 2, and Swindon's on that line there. So it's to the west side of England.
So almost geographically the same distance as Cardiff from Wrexham, or London from Wrexham, almost similar distance to travel?
Blimey, that's a good question. I'd have to Google map it, but no, Swindon's not very far from Cardiff, so it's further from, say, here. Swindon's probably, this is a guesstimate, but probably about 90 minutes from London, and it's probably about the same from Cardiff, maybe a bit less from Cardiff, maybe about an hour 15 from Cardiff. So from Wrexham down there, it wouldn't be the most straightforward journey, or for them up to Wrexham, as is the case here with this one. It would be probably a 2.5 hour drive, I would guess, up from Swindon, 2.5 hour drive. So in our terms, not particularly close. So, what you wouldn't identify here is any kind of significant rivalry between the 2 clubs. And we haven't met we've met many times in the past, but we haven't met for quite a long time. So that there's, it's another fixture on that basis, rather than one of those that you would look to. When you saw the fixture list come out, you wouldn't jump on Swindon as being the big one that you were most looking forward to.
Historically, either the town or the football club, what is Swindon known for?
I've done a bit more Swindon swatting up here, shouldn't I? I think it's known for the railways, but that one would need that's something that I've just dredged from the back of my mind there. Swindon's actually, I think it's fair to say, Swindon is one of those places that actually the answer to that is I'm not entirely sure. And that's actually relevant in a way, because Swindon's one of those places that you don't really know. There's nothing in particular that makes Swindon particularly outstanding in terms of, what's happened there in the past, or maybe what will happen there in the future. But one of the significant factors in this country is, or in England and Wales is, those places that have a football team. So if you say Swindon to me, I know it. Why do I know it? Because they have a football team. Swindon Town. I know about Swindon Town. They play at the county ground. The manager's called Mike Flynn. I think the nickname's still the Robins, which, by the way, used to be Wrexham's nickname as well. So shared nickname there. But, it's like Wrexham. The football team, the football club was the one thing that continued to put the town as was, city as is, on the map. And that's where the significance comes to all these communities. They've taken everything else away from us, but we've still, if you know us for anything, you know that we've got a football team. And that's where being part of that and having that thing that you can boast about, or that you can tell people about, or that if you say to somebody, where are you from? And they say, I'm from Swindon, you say, oh, are you a Swindon fan? Will be the next question off the back of that, and then, you might follow on that. If you've got great Swindon Town knowledge, you might follow on with other, or I remember when we played against you in whatever year it might be. Those sorts of things come. There's a topic for conversation there, rather than somebody saying, oh, I'm from Swindon, where the railways are really big. I don't know if that's right. I think it's right, but feel free to go and check it up. But it's the football team that tends to draw people into the conversation. And Wrexham's had that for years. It had that for years and years and years. People recognise the name of Wrexham for that same reason, only really because if you said to them what else happens in Wrexham, they wouldn't have a clue, frankly. But they would say maybe Mickey Thomas to you, wearing a Wrexham shirt, scores the goal against Arsenal, because that was the kind of thing that resonated way beyond Wrexham. So those are the markers that you have that put you on the map, which is why you want to be back in the Football League, which was why there was the great sort of push to try and get back into the Football League for Wrexham, because that's where people are more likely to take note of your existence. They know you exist because you're in the Football League. It's a bit more significant than being kind of lost in non-league without proper broadcast coverage and all the rest of it.
A little bit of prestige for the history.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is prestige attached to being in a place that supports a sort of, a largish football club. And even though these are small, quite often relatively small communities, Swindon's much bigger than Wrexham, by the way, but they're relatively small communities, but if they can support their football club, then there is prestige attached to that. And that's why Wrexham have been up at that level before, but that's why you find that lots of other clubs, owners who are prepared to spend ridiculous amounts of money trying to get their teams out of where we were, or even lower down than that, into where we are now again, because it must be the prestige. If there is money that comes along with it, financially you benefit from being at the higher level, but more than that really, because not that much money, more than that, it's about the prestige. It's about getting your team to that level that people recognise as being significant. So you have teams around Wrexham that they'll meet this season, people like teams like Crawley, clubs like Crawley, that never really had any kind of footballing presence until somebody went in there and thought, right, I can get Crawley into the Football League here, and I'm going to invest on the basis that they'll be able to make that journey, which they successfully achieved. Harrogate, another example, just up the road from where I live in Leeds. The whole time I've been in Leeds, 30 years, Harrogate was never a place that you would have thought would ever have had a Football League team, ever, because there just wasn't that kind of. There were two football clubs in the town, but they were both operating at a lowly kind of non-league level, below fifth tier level, some way below fifth tier level. And there just wasn't any kind of sense that the town could support a Football League club until somebody came in as an owner and he invested on the basis that he thought it could. And he was right. They got there. How long they managed to sustain it for is another question, but he got them to the Football League with all the prestige that then brings. So people now, they know Harrogate for lots of things, the spa baths, and there's history there and stuff, but now they also know that it's got a Football League club as well.
And you mentioned that they are not Wrexham's rivals. Who is Swindon's rivals, if you know of any?
Yeah, well, they played Forest Green the other night, and that was described as a derby because they're not very far apart, kind of on that M4 corridor, M4, M5 corridor on the west side of England. So they're quite close together. But Forest Green are another of these football clubs, who've been kind of, well, they've been different names over various times over recent years, but they have a guy behind them whose stated aim was to get them into the Football League, despite the fact there was no tradition of that having ever happened before in that particular place in Stroud. So he's got them into the Football League. So I'd like to know what the atmosphere was like around that game between Swindon Town and Forest Green, because it's not a fixture that's been possible for anything more than the most recent few years when Forest Green finally got into the Football League. So it isn't one of those derbies where great animosity and sometimes hatred will have been built up over years and decades of sort of confrontation with your local rivals. It's not one of those. It can't be, because the two have not been in the same circles or spheres for anything more than the last few seasons. So I don't know whether there's the same sense of, a passion attached to that particular game, but it would be described as two local rivals for sure. With Swindon, it probably goes a bit further west than that, I would imagine, as some of their potential rivalries. They've got the Bristol clubs, City in particular, Rovers, who they'll have played more often, who are a little further towards Cardiff up the M4. And then you've got teams in the Thames Valley who would probably be deemed rivals as well. So somebody like Reading, who's at the league higher currently, might be deemed, I guess, a rival there. I think I've got to say, ultimately, Swindon fans may lambast me for making this comment, but I'm not sure they've got any kind of, there isn't an El Clasico. I don't think there's an El Clasico Swindon sort of version. I don't think they have anything that rivals the Wrexham Chester rivalry, for instance, as well. I don't think there's anything quite. I could be wrong, but I don't think there's anything that would maybe necessarily inspire the passion that one used to.
What about notable players, either current or past?
Well, the one that I'd mentioned current is the guy that got playing as a striker, Charlie Austin, who's a name that people should recognise because he has had recent Premier League pedigree. So he's in his mid-30s, kind of thing. I think he's 33 now. But he's found himself. He's been up. He's climbed that ladder. He's one of those players who's had a lower league involvement and then got himself up to the Premier League and played at a good level at the Premier League for quite a while. And now he's probably in that, well, he definitely is on that stage where he's going back down the ladders. But he's the one straight away that when you look at the lineup and you see the name Austin there, I think he joined them last December. So he was there half of last season, and then he signed again for another year, I think, now for this season. But you know what he's capable of. Whether he is still capable of it now, well, maybe we'll find out this weekend. I hope we don't. But you know what he's previously been capable of. So he's a name that from their team sheet jumps out straight away.
Is that pretty common? We have some older players on Wrexham. Is that a pretty common thing that some older elite players drop down into the lower leagues later on in their career?
Yeah, it used to be very common. It was kind of the journey, if you like, in the old days. And, Wrexham at times in the past have had European Cup winners on the books of the football club. There's a good quiz question in there, but I think it's 3 or 4 that we've had previously who've won the European Cup, the Premier European club competition, and then ended up playing for Wrexham. So, it did happen a lot. It happens, I think it's fair to say, a lot less now. And the reasons for that are probably twofold. One is there are far more overseas players here for a start. So when they get towards the end of their career, they'll probably go back from wherever base is, wherever home is. They'll probably head in that direction. And the other reason is because they've earned so much money over their careers, these guys, that unless they really love it and really still have the passion for the game, even when they can't quite do what they used to do, unless they've still got that passion, they're probably just going to call it a day rather than sort of subject themselves to the experience of playing at a lesser level with lesser players in front of smaller crowds and poorer facilities. So you've got to have, unless you've got a real passion in there for the game and you just want to carry on as long as you absolutely can, there's much more scope these days because of the huge sums they're earning at the top level, for you not to have to make that journey. You don't need the money anymore. You're all done from that point of view.
Hey, has that changed because of social media and online presence?
I might have had an element in it in that people are kind of are not really, maybe some of the players are not entirely ready to put themselves through the experience of going somewhere where they maybe are going to just get criticised for having been somebody famous once. When they've been revered, adored, and kind of up on a pedestal at Premier League level, do they really want to go down through to places where people are much closer, you know, where you can hear every shout that comes from the crowd, where the dressing rooms are small, where, you know, in the past you used to kind of, every luxury is provided for you to make sure that you perform at your best, and now you've got to do some stuff yourself. You know, the room in the hotel may not be quite as big as it used to be. You've got to be ready for the potential privations of operating at that lower level, and you're still going to get the same level of criticism. In fact, in many senses, you might get more criticism because people know who you are. So if Charlie Austin misses a sitter on Saturday against Wrexham and the ball skies over the crossbar, the jeers will be that little bit extra loud for him because people know who Charlie Austin is. So you would have to be prepared for that, you know, that experience now being different, and any respect that you may have gained as being that top level, you know, fantastic performer at the highest level. The fans are not really into that concept, not on a match day anyway. You know, you'll pay respect to Charlie Austin, say what a great player he's been and all the rest of it now, but if you see him sky that chance over the crossbar, you'll be straight on his page.
And I guess the next step below that would be, or a lateral would be coming to the MLS and play with Messi or something like that.
Well, yeah, there's a strange one there, isn't there? Because that used to be that became a more modern route in the past, where you got older into your 30s, and the MLS maybe offered a good little track into top level football still, on a good salary still, but let's be honest, standard, not quite as exacting as you're previously probably used to. So the recruitment, I mean, Messi is obviously at the end of his career, great recruitment from the marketing perspective there, and obviously showing that he's still a really good player, but obviously not the player he was 10 years ago, can't possibly be still that guy. Yeah, so what you want are the players who make the move from, say, English football to MLS, maybe in their mid to late 20s, isn't it? What I think you're still tending to get is the guys who've crossed past the 30 mark and are now looking at as a slightly different adventure, or maybe an opportunity like Gareth Bale to go and live somewhere a bit more exotic and see something a bit different, which is, you know, perfectly valid reason for going to do it, frankly. But it could be that the MLS is still seeing players, to the large part, from Europe whose better days are behind them.
Is there any crossover with Wrexham players and Swindon Town players?
There's bound to be, because pretty much, I mean, it used to be much more commonplace when we were in the Football League, players would move between clubs at similar levels. Now we've been out of it so long, it's probably a little less common. So I'm off the top of my head, I can't think of anybody currently who switched between the two. And having looked down their team sheet from the game the other evening, there's nobody on that team sheet who I think has appeared for the two clubs. I mean, they've been shopping a different market to Wrexham, frankly, Swindon, in terms of recruitment recently, because they've had I think they've had financial issues there. No, not currently, but you'll always, I'm trying to think of somebody off the top of my head, because I'm usually quite good at this. I retain way too much football information inside this head of mine. But off the top of my head, it'll come to me, I'm sure, before we finish talking. But off the top of my head, it's not that there's nobody particularly obviously jumping out to me as a name, somebody who's made the big switch, well, it isn't a big switch, who's made the switch between Swindon and Wrexham, or the other way, indeed. I mean, the guy at Swindon that I do know well is Mike Flynn, who's the manager. And Mike's a Welsh guy, and he had a career predominantly in the lower divisions in England, and played for various clubs in England. And I got to know him a little bit. He was at Bradford City, one of the football clubs that I used to cover as part of my patch when I was a Sky Sports football guy. So I got to know him through that, and then got to know him better because he came on. I do coach education courses for football coaches run by the Welsh Football Association at the pro license level and the A license level, which are the top two coaching qualifications in Europe. And so they're sort of UEFA ratified, and I create the media module for that for the coaches in Wales. So Mike came on the course, and I got to know Mike through that, and that was he's got a really interesting story around him as a manager, because his first job, he's from Newport in South Wales, which is not very far away, particularly far away from Swindon. So Newport are the other Welsh team. You've got Cardiff, you've got Swansea, and then the other team that are in the Football League are Newport County. Well, Newport County, their club went bust. Here's the story again. Their club went bust, dropped down the division. So I don't want to spoil it when you get to the Newport fixture, so I'll be brief. But they dropped down the division. They reformed the football club, and they climbed up as a fan-owned club. They climbed the divisions right from the very bottom, and they've got themselves back in the Football League. And they did that by beating Wrexham in the playoff final at Wembley. And they got into the Football League, and we missed out on the opportunity to get back in the Football League. And Mike Flynn was around Newport at the time. I think he played in the playoff final. I think that's right. Then went into coaching as his career came to an end. Did the coaching course with us, so we were interacting on that. And then got the opportunity, I think even before the coach ed course had finished, to go in and manage at Newport County. You got offered the job there. And Newport County at the time were rock bottom of League Two. Towards the end of the season, there were about 10, 12 games left to go. And they looked, to all intents and purposes, absolutely nailed on for relegation to non-league again, to go back to the place that they'd got out of, non-league, because there were points adrift for the teams above. And Mike went in, and we spoke before he took on the job about how he was going to approach it from the communications point of view and what messages he was going to impart when he went into the job. And we talked through the first few weeks of his tenure as manager there. And he pulled off an absolute miracle. He led them to survival against all the odds, and Newport stayed up. And that was his first experience of management. And then he had some brilliant times in Newport after that, where they had great cup runs and did really well against higher level opposition in FA Cup ties and the rest of it. And that's how they made some significant funds from those cup runs that they had, but also their profile was enhanced by the fact that lots more people were seeing them. His profile was enhanced as well. So he went off and got a job with Walsall, our opponents in the last game. And it was a tough ask at Walsall because they were a team who were higher level, League One level, but probably found it difficult, maybe with some of the stuff behind the scenes, I don't know. And it didn't particularly work out for Mike there. So he left that job at Walsall. And the next role that he was offered then was the Swindon Town role. So it would be Mike who's in charge of the game this weekend. So I'll probably send him a little message ahead, but it won't say good luck. It'll say enjoy your day, but not too much, because he's a really good guy, but I don't want to see him smiling on Saturday evening.
What? How long's he been with Swindon then?
No, not long. He started in the summer, so this is his. He's into his first couple of matches with them. And you know, the football management job in England is crazy hard currently. So I see lots of the new coaches who are sort of getting either transitioning from being a player into coaching or just actually starting first steps in their coaching career. I interact with a lot of them through these coach education courses, and you will have somebody who starts the courses generally about 2 years in length, who starts the courses coach of one team, and by the end of the courses coach of 1, 2 or 3 other teams in the meantime, or maybe not in work at all. You know, that's fairly commonplace because there's such a kind of brutal turnover in terms of the tenure in position, time of tenure in position. It's getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and the pressure is great. So Mike is probably under pressure. I mean, they've won a game. They first game I think was called off, wasn't it, because of heavy rain? So they're a game behind everybody else, just one place above Wrexham in the table. I think is that alphabetical? I'm not sure. Anyway, probably on goal difference, whatever. But they've won one, and they're kind of up and running from that midweek win at Forest Green. But there'll be eyes on, because one thing they are is well supported. So they get pretty good gates, and I'll imagine they'll probably bring a good number up with them to the Racecourse. So we'll have another good away following there, sort of 1,000 plus away following. So traditionally they get pretty good gates. So whenever you have a well-supported club, expectation comes with that. And so Mike will need to make sure he kind of gets momentum going. So he gives them, their sense will be, I think, that they nearly got a playoff place last season and didn't. So I think their sense this year will be that they definitely should get a playoff place. They're one of the bigger teams in the division, that's for sure.
So for him, and I guess any other managers out there, when they come in to a team like Swindon Town and currently mid-table, is there an expectation that you better make it to the playoffs or you might not have a job next season?
Yeah, that about sums it up, frankly. Now, whether that's realistic or not, I don't know what Mike's budget is there, but I'll be surprised if it's anything like the Wrexham budget. I don't think Mike's budget will be as good as that. So he will be, not necessarily surviving on his wits, but he'll certainly have to do things a bit differently to say Wrexham might say, right, who do we want? Let's go and get that person. Mike's decision-making process in similar circumstances might be, right, who can I actually realistically go and bring in here? I'd love him, but I know I can't afford him. So I need to go and find somebody else, use his contacts, use his knowledge in the lower league football to find people from different places who might just fit and do a job for him. But there will be pressure on him because expectations of football fans are often unrealistic, and concepts like promotion and relegation add to that. Where in the NFL, where you might say, I'm sure we're going to have a great year this year, but then you don't particularly. It maybe doesn't feel still quite as seismic as if you're meant to be in the playoffs and you end up spending most of your season in the lower fourth or 4 or 5 teams in the league, because the results are a bit more dramatic. Getting the playoffs and people are happy because even if you don't achieve promotion, you've got close to achieving promotion. There's something progressive about being able to say we were in the playoffs anyway. But that bit down the bottom in League Two applies its own pressure because nobody wants to make the drop down out of the Football League into non-league because it's a big old drop, that one. So there's pressure at both ends of that League Two table. For a club like Swindon, more so because they do have heritage, prestige, history behind them. They do have a perception that they're a well-supported club, that they've been at a higher level, they've been bigger places. So that, rightly or wrongly, that will bring pressure on Mike to make sure he gets them at least into those playoff places.
And as a new manager for the team, obviously each manager has their own style of the way they like to run formations or the way they like to build a team. Do you know of a particular method that Michael Flynn is maybe going for this season? Or
well, if I look on the BBC website, it gives me a formation lineup. It will probably, I'm guessing, I haven't looked at it. I have looked at it very briefly. I didn't really take much notice of it. But it usually follows a pattern. So a 4-3-3 or 5-3-2 would be the anticipated formation because that's what most people kind of do. Variations perhaps around that. But I think he's 2 up top. I think Austin plays with another striker. So that would suggest... because the traditional lineup, obviously formation line from the perspective was the 4-4-2, was the kind of traditional for many, many years, but it's not quite such a popular formation. In fact, it's not used very often currently. So I'm guessing there may be 5-3-2. But if you want to have a check on that, there are plenty of, they're not always entirely accurate, I've got to say, but if you look at, say, on the BBC, we'll provide a formation lineup for it. Even if you Google Swindon Town and you look at the lineups when Google throws up all Swindon suggestions, then it will give you their most recent fixtures. If you go into their most recent fixture, not only will it show you the scoreline, but it will also show you the lineup for the game, and it will also show you what it says was their formation that they played for the game. I say what it says because I know I'm a soccer commentator, a game caller. That's the day job, effectively, covering all the Leeds United games. And I know that we quite often know what the formation is. And when we see it put in front of us by other people, it's not always entirely accurate. But generally speaking, they should usually be a good guide, at least, to how they'll line up for the game. So if you look on their fixture, so their last game being away at Forest Green, if you go on that, you'll see their lineup, the 11 that they started with in the game. You'll see their subs will be on that page as well. And you'll also see what is suggested was the lineup the formation that they started with for that game. And it's a process that I go through. I've been, prior to speaking to you, I've been looking, I've got Leeds United playing West Brom this weekend, this Friday night. So I'll be at Leeds United on the Friday night, then I'll be at the Racecourse for the Swindon game on the Saturday. One I'll be working, the other I'll be watching. But the process for the Friday night is that I'll do the research for that game. I'll prepare for that game. And one of the things I'll do is go into exactly as I described to you there, but for West Bromwich Albion to see how they lined up in their last match. see what the 11 was that they started with, but also to see what formation it suggests they were playing as well.
And that's good information for us new fans of where to find the formations in the rundown. You also mentioned that there's workshops that you took part in and that you met Michael Flynn. That's pretty common for managers to do.
Yes, because now there's kind of stipulations around the qualifications required to manage coach at the higher level. And where those stipulations don't exist, there are expectations instead, perhaps, that you need to be as best qualified as you can, but certain jobs in certain places. So there's been an instance this season in Scotland, at Hearts in Scotland, who appointed a guy as their, technically really as their manager, but they couldn't call him manager or head coach really, because he doesn't have the pro license. And the pro license is required to be Hearts are in European competition this year. And the pro license is required for you to be described as a head coach in European competition. So Hearts kind of created a different title for him, and they also appointed, I think he's called the director of football, who would take on the mantle. He has a pro license, so he would take on the mantle of technically manager, but the two of them both work on the touchline in the technical area, but there's a bit more of a kind of fuzzy area as to what the delineation of role is there, and that's by and large because he doesn't have the required qualification for that particular competition. So coaches, it's kind of, if you want to drive a car, you need a driving license, and you have to go through the process that allows you to get the driving license. Whether you think, you might be a brilliant driver without the license, but you need the license, and it's quite the same with coaching, to be honest with you now, is that you might know all the stuff, or you think you know all the stuff, but until you've gone through the process and until you've acquired the qualification, that's the proof that you know the stuff, rather than the fact that you say to somebody, but I've been a footballer for 25 years, so of course I know the stuff. Then you need to prove that, so you need to go through the course. So when I started doing the courses, there was quite a lot of skepticism around about the value of them in terms of the career going forward. Lots of coaches, I don't need this, I know this stuff already. Who are you to tell me how to do this stuff? But that skepticism has largely gone away now, and people, I think, by and large now recognize the validity and the value of doing the course, because I think Mike will tell you, I hope Mike will tell you, that he found it beneficial, for instance, in having access to me when he got that job that he got at Newport in really difficult circumstances, to be able to come to me as somebody who'd worked with on the course about media and communication, and then to be able to have conversations with me about how he might best tackle the particular, pretty tough challenges that he had from a communications point of view. A team that's rock bottom in the table and seemingly dropping out of the game in your first ever management job, that requires you to get it right. So he had somebody you could go to and have those conversations with, and like a sounding board, and I would make suggestions to him about things he might want to try and incorporate into his messages. So it offers that opportunity and that possibility in terms of mentorship. And what we do a lot with the Welsh coach education courses is based on mentorship. There's somebody for the coaches, the players turning into coaches, to go and to talk to guide, to help, to sort of sound off to run things past. They have that access to mentors there. And so I do think that the courses, which go into all sorts of areas now, psychology, the business side of things, the media, obviously, that they are all encompassing in by and large now. And I do think they're helpful to the guys to go through the process. And
that license, is it a requirement?
Not always a requirement. It depends where you're working. In the Welsh Premier, I don't know what the setup is in England. I must admit, I don't think it's a requirement in England currently. But in the Welsh Premier League, or the JD Cymru as it's called, it is a requirement to be a pro license holder, to be the head coach or the manager or whatever. Then you are meant to be a pro license holder. So if you want to work in Wales, then it's every bit in your interest to make sure you go and do that coach education course and invest time and money as well in doing the course to get the qualification, which will then allow you to, at the very least, to work at that level. It's the bigger picture is there's kind of an expectation that you would have that qualification now. At some point, you will go and acquire that now. A license for sure as an entry level. It's not the entry level qualification. There's a number that come before that. Those two are the top level, the top two rungs of the ladder in terms of coach education. So A license and then pro is the top qualification. So you would go and you work up towards those. They have fast track routes now. So if you're a former pro and you've played pro football at an elite level, there's potential for kind of fast tracking involved in that. Your elite level status buys you the right to get higher up the ladder quicker, so that you can get quickly towards that A license level, which is where you're really doing the serious work now that should help you in your job.
That's it. That's awesome. I had no clue about the professional licensing. That's good information for sure. Thanks.
Yeah, well, it's a very, I mean, it's a great course to work on. And the Welsh Football Association of Wales, to give its correct title, has established a really good reputation for doing this coach education stuff. I was brought into it by a guy called Ossian Roberts, and Ossian most recently was working as Patrick Vieira's assistant at Crystal Palace. Prior to that, though, for a number of years, it was Ossian who created a coach education structure in Wales that was really, really successful. And we started to bring in people way beyond our relatively lowly status as a small nation to come and do the course, because the reputation garnered by the course started to go way beyond the borders of Wales. So that's how we had some top level people come on. So Patrick Vieira did his course with us, Marcel Desailly did his course with us, Craig Bellamy's at Burnley working on the touchline now has done his course with us. We've got a number of Premier League managers we've had who did the course with us. Mikel Arteta did the course with us. So we've been able to bring in people sort of from all over the world. We've got lots of American coaches have been on the course as well. We've got people who are working in the game in the States now, who are doing, so Jack Collison, who's working out in America currently, coaching at Huntsville, is it? The new club in Huntsville. So we've got people out there. Carl Robinson was a FAW coach ed guy as well. So we have a global, hopefully, I think we've got a global reputation now for producing a good course that is useful to coaches. And they go off, and it's brilliant to see, they go off and work all over the world, you know, and you kind of track how they're getting on and stuff. So Mike's working at the League 2 level, but we have people all over at all levels in all countries.
So Michael Flynn goes through the training. He gets this opportunity here at Swindon Town. You were saying before that the gates are a big contribution to the bottom line, or at least to the fan base, that there's good support. What kind of crowds would we be expecting at Swindon Town?
Well, they get 5-figure gates, so they'll probably, again, I haven't looked at last season's average, but it'll be, my guess would be, it'll be somewhere around about similar numbers for Wrexham, with the potential for a bigger game to go higher. So they will have been operating at an attendance level in the past. It'll vary, you know, good runs, bad runs. You lose. It's like Wrexham. We haven't had a bad run for quite a while, but you know, I've been at the Racecourse when there's been less than 1,000 supporters in the ground for a league fixture, and that was in the Football League, by the way, not in non-league. So, and by the same token, I've been in the ground for a league game when there's been over 20,000 people there as well. So you do occasionally find places where you'll get sort of wide fluctuation in terms of the potential fan base there. So Swindon will be kind of in a mid position on that basis. I don't think they'll be quite as dramatic as that swing I've described from 100,000 to 20,000. It'll be somewhere in the middle of that, but they'll go 6 or 7 maybe when things aren't going so well, and maybe 10, 11, 12 when things are going better.
Is County Ground, is that where they've always played, or is that a
I think
stadium?
So, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a decent ground as well. It's one of the bigger grounds in League 2. It's had a bit of work done on it in relatively recent times. So it's one of those places that Wrexham will go to. I mean, as I've already mentioned, there's no great history between the two clubs in terms of the rivalry. But Wrexham fans will go there, and when they go to the county ground for the return fixture, they will be reminded that this is the kind of venue that Wrexham have been kind of missing out on over the recent years. Going to places like this on a regular basis, bigger grounds with bigger crowds. And that's that genuinely, for those of us who remember it from the times previous, that was our expectation. That's where we thought we were rightfully where we were operating, at that level with these clubs, with these bigger grounds and these bigger crowds. And then all of a sudden we found ourselves like leaning on railings at the side of a pitch, because we're leaning on the railing around the surround around the pitch, because there was no stand, there was no terrace or stand. And that's the real moment when you realize, how did we end up here? How did we get here? What the hell has just happened? So to go from a decent looking ground with a bit of tradition around it, like the county ground Swindon, to then end up at somewhere like Guiseley, which was one of those that's just up the road from me here in Leeds. And I'd been there, but it was absolutely the archetypal non-league football ground with a tiny little stand with kind of 3 or 4 rows of seats in it. And then areas around the pitch where you just leaned on a sort of a surround fence around the pitch. There was no terracing or anything to stand on. So you were 1 or 2 deep at that point. And to find myself watching my team playing there, that was a real kind of, that was one of those moments that still stands out as being the realization of how far we'd fallen. And by contrast, playing against people will chuckle in a way. Those who love Premier League football will chuckle if I say, our dream was to play Walsall and Swindon again, because it doesn't sound that big a dream, frankly, but it has been. We just wanted to get back to this level that we felt was something much more akin to our own setup.
Yeah, back in the league.
Back in the league. Yeah, that's where we wanted to be. And so you look forward to the fixture. Swindon is a good fixture from that point of view because they are a solid football league team with a decent support, a bit of history behind them. When we go there, there'll be a good atmosphere. We'll take a few with us. It'll be kind of deemed to be a sort of effective little bit. They always have a little bit of extra because they're relatively close to the Welsh border. So Cardiff will have gone there in sort of vast hordes in the past. Because it's a pretty close trip for the Cardiff fans, and if they were travelling well, then they'd take loads there. Swansea probably, who are further up the M4 from Cardiff, but still would probably look on Swindon as being one of their more accessible away fixtures. So there'll be a little bit of history, English-Welsh history there. That rivalry will be there, based mainly on the fact that they have those South Walian teams that they play against. But you'll probably get some residual from that. You'll probably hear a few of the chants, and maybe you'll get a chorus from the Swindon away end of "God Save the King" or something like that. And then you'll get the response from the home supporters as well. By and large, there's not the great level antipathy between the two clubs, but it's a Welsh club playing an English club, and that always there's a little element that's added on that base.
Especially when someone scores. Then
absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, at the moment you've got Wrexham coming off the back of a really good performance against Walsall in midweek, and that first win, that long-awaited first win, and more points on the board. Played well against Wimbledon. I wasn't there, I was working, but looking at the highlights, looked like they would have been good value for a win at Wimbledon as well, frankly. And then played really well against Wigan, team from a higher division, to knock them out of the Carabao Cup prior to that. So we had a crazy game in the first one against MK Dons, where we just were completely off the pace. That might be something to do with not being long off the plane back from the States. But maybe we're just getting up to speed now. So people will be looking to this fixture, the follow-up from Tuesdays, to see further signs of the momentum being re-established in terms of the way that players play. And to have scored as many goals as we've scored already this season is particularly encouraging, because I think defensively we can still tighten up, and will tighten up. But the fact that they're scoring plenty of goals in the absence of Paul Mullin, the top goal scorer, suggests that there's real. If we can score goals again this season, I think we've got half a chance. Because I do think we'll probably concede quite a few. But if we can score plenty still and carry on as we have done in non-league on that basis, then I think we've got half a chance. I think it's the goals from all areas of the pitch that is one of the encouraging factors there, that lots of people are chipping in with a contribution from the goal scoring front. So people will be looking to Saturday's game now to emphasise that Tuesday's wasn't a one-off, that Tuesday was the side beginning to get into a groove, and that Saturday offers the opportunity to further prove that. But again, as we saw on Tuesday, Walsall were a good side. MK Dons were a good side, and the level is better. I was confident this was going to be the case. Whereas people were saying that Wrexham were going to walk through this league, I was confident that we would find that the standard was higher. Without wanting to name drop too wildly here, I had this conversation with my good friend Ryan Reynolds prior to and during the game against MK Dons. I said, I'm sure you're going to see the standards better. And I think even by half time, it was manifestly clear that, these were going to be better teams with better players. So the challenge for Wrexham is to rise to that, to match that, and then to better that. And we're going to have that every week now. It's going to be fascinating. I hope it's going to be a great ride for sure.
And I think currently that it's 8 goals for and 8 goals against for Wrexham.
Yeah, so joint most for, I think, isn't it? And most against.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the back of that kind of calamitous defensive display against MK Dons. There's no other way to describe that. I mean, things just unraveled in that game from a defensive perspective. You score 3 goals at home against a good side like MK Dons. You're thinking, wow, we've done well here. Generally speaking, you've won the game by scoring those 3 goals. But actually, we could have conceded 7. So that was a little bit of a throwback to the season before last. Maybe just some of you guys were just getting on board at that point, but we had some absolutely crazy games. It's reflected in the documentary series, obviously. We had some crazy games, particularly at home before that, where we'd score lots, but so would the opposition. And that Grimsby game, obviously, is the classic example of that, where we scored 4 goals at home and still managed to lose the game. So it's in there. It's in there in the makeup. So if they can eradicate that element from the play, even against better sides, then it could be quite interesting.
Is there any manager's style that actually coaches towards that? In that, I'm saying in the NBA, there was a coach called Coach D'Antoni, and he famously coached for offense, not big on defense, and basically just try to outscore the other team. Sure, they're going to get their points, but we're going to load up on scores, and we're just going to try to outscore.
Yeah, there are coaches for whom that is the approach. I mean, I saw a lot of Leeds United, almost every game under Marcelo Bielsa. That missed the first season, but then picked up from the second season onwards. And there was an element to the play there where you felt that he would be happy to do that. It wasn't necessarily the only thing that Leeds were about, but they were about going and scoring goals. And if it was a 3-2, then he'd probably be happy with a 3-2 than a 1-0, or every bit as happy with a 3-2 as a 1-0. So they would be front foot in their approach to the game. And actually, it's what Wrexham are to an extent now. There's far greater caution displayed in the away performances, generally speaking. They don't tend to do it the same way that they do at home, but at home they just want to run over the opposition. And they have the whole that noise from the crowd, and that in particular if they're playing towards the most of the fans in the second half, as they like to do, they have that kind of the psychological impact that appears to have on the opposition. They score a lot of goals playing at them towards that end. So you do have a team that is going to charge forward at home. I mean, Wrexham are never now going to, I don't think, in the way they've played over the last 2 seasons at home, are never going to sit back and invite the opposition to come at them, unless they're playing a team who actually dictate that, who are really good on the ball. MK Dons did that at times in the first game. They were good in possession and they worked the ball around, and they didn't give Wrexham the opportunity to pile forward. Particularly, they were very good at that right at the start of the second half, when it appeared Wrexham had got back in the game with the goal before half time. They were playing the way they wanted to play in the second half, and you expected a big roar and you expected them to take control and take the game by the scruff of the neck, and it didn't happen because they couldn't get the ball often enough against MK Dons. So that's where better players may not be dictated to quite as readily as those that we've been playing in recent seasons. But there is that sense at home that Wrexham will play that very much on the offensive rather than the defensive. And if we'll score 6, you might score 5, but we'll score 6, which I think was the Dover score from that famous game, wasn't it, a couple of seasons ago? That was a crazy, crazy day. And I did, even in the MK Dons game, when we were 4-1 down in that game, I still felt that there was possibility that Wrexham could get back in it. And actually, having got back to 4-2, and then the next goal was the key one, because MK Dons got it to go 5-2 up. Had Wrexham not conceded that goal and got nicked the third goal that they did, as it turned out, that might have come to pass. There was, because they do score goals, because they like to pile forward, there is a possibility that those sort of crazy outcomes could happen. That in that game it didn't. Defensively, we were slipshod when we should have been tight at the key moment, and when there was still something in the game. But hopefully going forward, lessons learned, players getting up to pace, some players coming back from injury, hopefully as well, to give this. It's a big squad. It's a strong squad, and it may yet get stronger before the window closes. But there's already a lot of good players in there, and they're covering well for those who are currently absent as well, which is another good sign.
Yeah, and one of the best scoring teams against Wrexham is Wrexham. this season.
Yeah.
So we have your buddy Michael Flynn managing the Robins.
Yeah.
What are you expecting this weekend, this Saturday, as far as a result, if we're so bold?
Well, I tend not to be so bold, frankly. I have this kind of old-fashioned karma thing that when people ask me for score predictions, I've said it all the way down the years. I used to spend a lot of time interviewing football fans outside of football grounds ahead of football matches as part of my job. And the question would inevitably get asked, "What do you think the score will be today?" And when fans would say to me, "I think we'll win 4-0," I would always kind of inwardly wince, because I was thinking, where do you get that level of optimism from, that positivity from? Because my response is always, "Well, I'll be happy with a draw, a tie," because it may not be actually what I think, but I don't want to give voice to my level of optimism, because I fear that if I say it, then it's definitely not going to happen. So on this occasion. So what I don't do is I never would say, "Oh, I think we'll win easily." I'm like managers on that basis. I've interviewed 10,000 managers down the years, and I've never yet heard one of them say, when I say to them, "What sort of game do you think this will be?" I've never yet heard one of them say, "Well, if we don't win this one, I'm going to resign because we are so bad." I have never, ever, ever heard that from a manager. They will always say to you, "Well, I expect a tough game," because, although results for them haven't been great, I've had a look at them, and believe me, they're better than those results. They will do the same thing. They'll find a way to tell you that this will be difficult, even though they're probably telling their team something completely different in the dressing room. But publicly, that's how their message will manifest itself. So I've probably picked up on that. Plus, I'm a natural born pessimist anyway. Having said all of that, if we play like we did against Walsall, who weren't a bad side, by the way, who had good spells in the game, I was quite impressed with them going forward, not so good at the back. But if we can maintain that level, that confidence in what we do going forward, then we've got half a chance. And I'd probably say that in most games, from what I've seen so far in the league, that even MK Dons, where we were not as good as them, but I could see why we weren't as good as them on the day, and I could also see how we might be as good as them the next time we meet them, perhaps, which is something Phil Parkinson alluded to at the end of that match as well. So in this instance, another big crowd, another sellout crowd, good atmosphere, hopefully good weather, I think, this weekend as well, and the confidence booster from scoring lots of goals against a half-decent Walsall side in the week. I would hope that they'll be able to carry all that into the game and make a good go of it. I think it'll be probably tighter than Tuesday was, so I would settle for a narrow victory in the match on Saturday.
Okay.
I'll settle for any type of victory, but I'll settle for a narrow victory. It's as close as you're going to get to a prediction.
3 points are 3 points.
Well, that's it. That's all. At the end of the day, it could be the worst game you've ever seen, and it could be decided by a 95th minute kind of deflection from 3 yards away from the goal line that rolls over that goal line into the back. It doesn't matter. We're in the business, in this league structure, we're in the business of just acquiring points. So result almost always overshadows performance. So play poorly, win. Well, you'll say, we'll take that. Play well, lose, bit harder to take.
Yeah. Well, that was a lot of good information, Bryn. I did learn an incredible amount. Let me see if I can recap my learnings. So Swindon Town, as we all know, just a big railroad town.
I think they make trains there. I think that's but it's not particularly a rail hub. I think they make trains in Swindon. Right, so your next task after this will be to go and check that, but I think that's what they do. They make trains there. Yeah,
I'll put it right here at this moment for the accuracy. And then, of course, I mean, you're going to be right. You're going to be correct. So I don't doubt that at all.
I won't be so sure, but yeah, hopefully so.
And so not a big rivalry between Wrexham, new gaffer, new manager. Stakes are high for both teams, but as most teams would be in any fixture coming up. They have a great history, a nice old county grounds, and a tremendous amount of support from their group, as well as a little bit of possibly the Welsh to cross-border tension, possibly, but ultimately this is a team that has seen greatness in the past, and their supporters are ready for more greatness as we're on the cusp of, can we get to what Swindon Town has seen in the past?
That's it. You've listened well. A plus.
I will take it. This is at when I show my mother my report card.
That's it.
Somebody is getting ice cream this week.
Yeah, you'll get candy. You'll get plenty of candy. Well done.
Well, Bryn, thank you for teaching me how to Wrexham. Another milestone on my way to, I guess, getting my Wrexham supporters license, if that's a thing.
If it isn't, it should be.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much. Hopefully, later on in the season or so, if you have time, we can jump on and do it again.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it. It's been good.
All right. Well, have a great day. Have a good time on Friday with West Brom, and then Saturday. Let's go and take those 3 points.
Let's do this thing.
All right, Bryn. Up to town.